The film begins with a man climbing a mountain without any protection, using only his strength and courage. However, he loses his grip and falls to his death. His friends and family gather for a proper burial. Nick, a private investigator, narrates that the man was from the wealthy Varden family. The father had recently passed away, leaving behind Elias, the twin brother of Leo, along with Leo's wife Penelope and their mother Audrey. Nick arrives on the island, where Penelope introduces herself. She asks him to secretly investigate Leo's death, believing it wasn't an accident. She offers to double his pay and give him free accommodation in exchange for uncovering the truth. Nick is taken to a monastery, where he will stay during the investigation. After settling in, he drinks heavily, trying to forget his own personal problems. Nick goes into town and bribes a police officer for information on Leo's death. He meets George Mena, the detective handling the case. Nick pretends to be an investigator from a global life insurance company and asks to see the file on Leo's death, hinting that someone in the family might have been involved. George is hesitant to help, so Nick leaves his card, asking him to reconsider. Later, Nick follows Elias to the mountainside and watches him climb without any ropes, even though his brother had recently died in a similar way. Nick introduces himself as an agent from the National Intelligence Service and lies, saying that Leo was a major shareholder in a big company. Elias believes him and agrees to meet for coffee. During their talk, Nick asks if Elias and Leo got along before his death. Elias admits they had normal family arguments, but nothing serious. He remembers their father giving them boxing gloves as kids to settle disputes. He also mentions a big fight 3 weeks before Leo's death, but says they were otherwise close. During the conversation, Elias gets a message warning him that Nick isn't who he says he is. Elias leaves quickly, telling Nick not to show up again. Meanwhile, George had secretly been listening to their conversation. Nick convinces George to work with him, and after reviewing the conversation, Nick starts to think Elias is hiding something, maybe out of jealousy. George, however, is unsure, reminding Nick that Elias comes from a very wealthy family. Nick then notices a photo on George's board and learns that Giannis, a drug lord and close friend of Elias, might be connected to the case. Nick decides to meet Penelope again and asks her about her relationship with Leo. She explains that she met Leo during their time at Oxford University, where she attended on a scholarship and worked as a waitress. Leo had taken an interest in her then. This conversation reminds Nick of his own troubled marriage. He recalls a night when he came home to find his wife dressed up, only for her to tell him she was going out to meet someone else. This was the first time Nick had felt real jealousy. Back in the present, Penelope gives Nick the address of where she first met Leo. During his investigation, Nick finds a headband and some photos of the family, as well as a family friend who might have more information. He interrogates Victoria Lackey, a family friend, about the night the twin brothers fought at a bar. Victoria claims she only served drinks and doesn't know what happened, but she shares that Leo earned a salary from the family business while Elias was the CEO, with their mother overseeing everything. She adds that while Leo loved Penelope, Elias was the more confident and assertive one, which is why he ran the company. In contrast, Leo was considered too timid to take control. Penelope then takes Nick to the crime scene and shows him the spot where Leo's body was found. Nick is amazed that Leo could have climbed the mountain with his bare hands and no safety gear. Penelope explains that their father had taken them on dangerous adventures as children, including mountain climbing, so the twins were used to such challenges. Nick then shares what he learned from Victoria, suggesting that Leo might have been murdered, which supports Penelope's suspicions. Penelope takes us back to the past during college life. It turns out that Elias knew Leo had a crush on her, so when Leo wasn't looking, Elias took his phone and texted Penelope to meet up for studying. Elias immediately deleted the message so his brother wouldn't notice. Later, Elias pretended to be Leo and approached Penelope, and she fell for it. Eventually, Leo ends up sleeping with Penelope. When asked, she admits she knew it was Elias all along but chose to stay quiet. After graduation, Leo loses the love of his life to his twin brother. To make matters worse, Elias was also the favorite child in the family and the CEO of the family company, Eurus. This leaves Leo furious. Nick, a private investigator, wants to meet Leo's mother Audrey to see how she reacts to some news. Penelope hesitates before telling him there will be a party on a yacht, giving him an opportunity to meet her that night. Nick attends the event and introduces himself to Audrey as a friend of Leo, which prompts her to start a conversation with him. Nick tells her there's a rumor that Leo was murdered, not killed in an accident. Audrey becomes sad and warns Nick not to interfere with the family's problems. Just then, Elias finds Nick talking to his mother and angrily pushes him, telling him to leave the island or be thrown off the boat. This makes Nick suspicious of Elias. The next day, George, a friend, delivers bad news to Nick. His superior has warned him to stay away from Nick or risk being deported back to Africa. Nick understands and says it's okay, knowing he now has to work alone. He goes to meet Victoria at the bar but finds it closed and off limits. Left with no choice, Nick begins spying on the family and sees Elias taking a stash of cash. He follows him to a club and sees Elias dealing with Giannis. Unfortunately, Nick is spotted, beaten, and warned to leave the island or face death. Fortunately, George is there and helps carry Nick back to the monastery. The next morning, Nick meets Penelope and tells her about what happened. While looking into things, he realized that anyone wanting to reach the hiking mountain needs a boat, but he doesn't know which one. Nick asks George for help again as he gets closer to finding out who killed Leo. He asks for a file with information on all the boats on the island and narrows down the ones that were working on the day Leo died. Nick and George go to the dock and find the boat, but Giannis's men spot them. George shoots one of them but is killed by Giannis. Nick quickly grabs George's gun and shoots Giannis, killing him. Later, Nick feels sad about his friend's death while looking at the autopsy report. He notices something strange in the x-rays, which makes him suspicious. He calls Penelope and tells her he has found the truth. He asks her to watch Elias and make sure Audrey is there when he arrives. When Nick gets to the house, Elias threatens to call the police, but Nick tells him they are already coming. Nick explains his investigation, showing that Elias has been pretending to be Leo. The real Leo killed his brother Elias out of jealousy to take his identity. Nick points out that Elias was the favorite son, the CEO, and had won Penelope's love, which made Leo angry. Nick also says that Penelope knew Elias was pretending to be Leo in college because of how he acted and how good he was in bed. Realizing her son is an imposter, Audrey shoots Leo dead. Audrey is arrested for murder, and after the case is solved, Nick gets ready to fly back to New York. However, thinking about something Penelope said, Nick leaves the plane, takes a taxi to the yacht, and finds Penelope dressed up. Nick, being a good investigator, has figured out that Penelope planned the whole thing. She explains that she wanted to be free, but Elias wouldn't let her, so she worked with Leo, who wanted to be CEO. After Elias died, Leo treated her the same, so she hired Nick and left clues for him to find out the truth. Nick compliments her for being so clever, and now she gets to live as CEO. Penelope asks Nick about his own family problems. Nick says he almost wanted to kill his wife but changed his mind when he saw his daughter's face. To avoid conflict, he left the country. The movie ends with Penelope taking Nick to one of the family's ferries heading to New York so he can go back to his family. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you